So within our framework, within our ministry, we've got 5 core values, and we run everything through those core values. And that's fresh: family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope.
The Fresh Church Podcast.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Fresh Church Podcast. I want to ask a question. How do I know if I'm doing a good job or not in ministry? How do you know if you're doing a good job or not in ministry? If a teenager walked into your church this Sunday and gave you a report card, how would you score? What would your grades be? What would be even the metrics that they would use to give their opinion of your ministry? Are you doing a good job? And how can you do a better job? How can you increase that? Well, today that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about different ways that you can evaluate your ministry. And then just for fun, I want to give you the perspective if one of a 15-year-old was to walk through a church, maybe your church, and give you their opinion of what's going on. So I talked to an associate pastor yesterday who's over a couple different areas in their church, including kids ministry. And Shelly came out of a staff meeting where, honestly, she felt beat up. Okay, they had been discussing the fact that new people were not staying at the church. They were seeing people come in and go right back out. People weren't staying around for more than 1 or 2 services before they were lost. And that lead pastor was putting a lot of pressure on his team to get those people to stick. And she walked out of there almost ready to quit because she felt like she was doing a really good job. She's been recruiting and has a lot of volunteers. She's got people showing up every Sunday, and yeah, they've seen the new people and they're doing little things, giving them little gift bags and welcoming them and greeting them. And she's doing a good job with the curriculum. She's making sure everything's going okay. And the other areas, responsibilities that she has, it takes away from that time. She's working as hard as she can. And she walked out of there now with this burden that somehow she has to fix this problem. She has to figure out, how do I get people to stay at church? And maybe your church is feeling that. How do we get people to stick around? Well, I'm going to cover that a little bit later to help you out with that also. But as I was talking with Shelly, I just started asking her, okay, so where did this conversation come from? What is it about your church that might be causing people to want to stay or not want to stay? And honestly, she really didn't know. I mean, what she knew is the people she interacted with, it seemed to be positive, and she was trying to talk and say hi to people as often as she could. And honestly, it came down to the question, am I doing a good job or not? That's really what she was wondering. Am I doing a good job? Because now the pastor is evaluating all of us on something that I don't even know if I feel like I have control over. And so based on everything that she was doing, she had this concern. So I put a pause on our discussion for a second. I said, hold on. Okay, let's talk about this. Am I doing a good job in ministry or not? Okay, and so I just asked her, I go, well, what are the core values of your church? And there was a pause. You mean like our vision and goals? I'm like, sure. And she said, we grow people. We grow people. Okay, now take that out of context for a minute. If you said, what's your organization's goals? We grow people. Like, are you a food company and you shove lots of food inside of them? I mean, like, oh, no, we have lots of babies here, okay? We're OBGYN. We're growing little people. No, we grow people. What does that even mean? Okay, we're going to have more potluck dinners. How do you evaluate yourself on that? Is that a numerical thing? We grow people because we're adding more numbers. We're adding more people to small groups. Okay, is there something about that that's spiritual? And how do you judge that? We grow people spiritually. Well, what does that look like? And she said she'd been at a conference a couple of years ago, and they came back with a ministry philosophy methodology called GROW. And so when I asked her about it, she couldn't really explain it to me. She just talked about some of the cool things of the conference. Now I'm familiar with this ministry model. It's a great model. It's based out of a church in Alabama, a large church. And their pastor actually put together a book, a core value system that they use for their church, and they've seen great growth from it. And that value was taken from using the 4 different cups of Passover. And I mean, it was kind of a stretch, but it worked. I could hear his heart in it. And his heart was such that, hey, these core values work. And for their church, it does. But as often the case, the core values get diluted over time, and pretty soon it becomes about the methods. So when I talk to people about this program, what this church has modeled for them, I hear things about they've got great things like First Wednesday, and they call their volunteers Dream Team, and they've actually got a really good recovery program. But if you don't know why you're doing it, doesn't make a lot of sense. You see, those are the methods. And if you've heard any of the things we've talked about before, we talk about three things when it comes to church aspects. There's theology, philosophy, and methodology. Theology is what you believe. Philosophy is why you do things. Methodology is the way or how you do things. So let's break that down a little more specifically. Theology could be like, we believe in the Trinity. We might believe in baptism and the way that baptisms occur. We believe in the return of Jesus. Like, those are theological stances for your church that might be different from the church down the street. You might even be in a church where you don't 100% agree with the theology, but you've decided to stay there and be part of that organization. That's great. But theology isn't something that you evaluate how ministry is doing. Can you imagine doing a yearly review where you were asked, so how has your theological approach to the triune Godhead increased attendance in the preschool area? I got no answer for that, right? Theology doesn't help you set up with any kind of evaluation. It just sets a core foundation for your church. Next is philosophy. That's why we do it. This is the core values of your church. It's everything that you can actually be evaluated on. These are the things that are important to us. So let's say you have a core value of generations. Well, then you're going to evaluate, are we doing something? Are we resourcing? Are we providing ministry for people at every generation in our church, from preschool, high school, students, young adults, married people, retirees, senior citizens? Are we doing something for the different generations? The last thing to talk about is methodology. This is the who, what, when, where, and how you do things. Okay, philosophy is what you need to accomplish. The methodology is how you're going to do it. Okay, without a philosophy, you're just doing stuff. Okay, it's where I ask churches, why do you do this? And they go, because we've always done it. They don't have a philosophy or core values that help guide them. So as I asked this question of Shelly, what are your core values or philosophy? And she just communicated, we grow people. I decided I would dive a little deeper. Like, well, what does that mean? And she stammered for a minute, and she had to think back to what was that meeting like when we came up with this core value. And then she started explaining it this way: that's one team, that we're in unity together. Grow. That's seeing development in people's lives and people. Well, everyone, right? Okay, so we're unified together and we're developing everybody. That's a really hard task to overcome. Like how do you evaluate that? And I started asking her questions, and she couldn't put specifics to it. So for her, it was hard for her to understand, am I doing a good job? Because she had nothing to compare herself to. Imagine you're taking a class, a college course, and the teacher's subjective. You randomly get a grade for your midterm, not because of anything you've done. You have no idea what's going on. You just got a grade. Sometimes church feels that way. I need to know what I'm trying to accomplish so that I can accomplish it, to know how well I'm doing and where there's areas of improvement. How do you know if you're doing a good job or not? Well, how do I know if I'm doing a good job? I got to have something to compare to. So to just step aside for a minute, I worked for 2 different staffing companies in corporate America between churches at one point in my life. And one of those staffing companies had 8 core values that they lived by. I mean, lived, breathed, and died by these values. And even as we interviewed people, we asked questions based on those 8 values. When we let people go, it was because of some of those values had some issues with them. I remember one of the values was open communication. And one of the things that we always talked about was having an open communication, being able to tell people what was going on without the risk of it might come back to harm me. Another one of ours was integrity, and making sure that what we do had integrity in it. Unfortunately, we worked in a company that didn't have the moral values that I would think of as a Christian organization, because they weren't a Christian organization. So defining integrity became challenging at times. So that was one company. Then I worked for another staffing company, and that staffing company had a cute little motto. Honestly, I can't even remember what it was. That staffing company had so many different things happening. Every branch kind of ran their own way. Some of the different branches even had different names. Even though we were all under the same umbrella, there were different brandings within the company, different customers that they would go after. So customers that I had in a different city, that customer couldn't even use the same company because they didn't have those kind of employees. Different mottos, different themings. There was no core value that went across the board for everybody. You know what? That company doesn't exist anymore. They don't exist because they couldn't get on the same page. They didn't have any way to evaluate themselves where they were all working towards the same mark. So within our framework, within our ministry, we've got 5 core values, and we run everything through those core values. And that's fresh: family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. And so for us, that means family. We want you to be part of our family. We're going to resource our family. Relationship. By the way, if you want to keep visitors, you need to connect with them and build a relationship. Okay, I'm going to say that again. If you want to keep visitors, if you want people to come back to your church, you need to build relationship with them. Having them fill out a little card and drop it in a basket in the back does not build relationship. Have the person sitting beside them ask them to lunch. That builds relationship. Connect with them on a personal level. Next one is experience. Man, the best experience in the world is a wonderful concert, right? Nah, the best experience in the world is hanging out with friends and coming back with memories. Create memories at your church that people want to hang on to and tell others about. Safety. And then finally, hope. Are we sharing the hope of Jesus with others? And as a company, as a ministry, we do our action plans based on this. We do discussions based on this. When we're talking through ideas on what we want to do and how we want to do it, every time we go back to our core values, does it fulfill what God's asking us to do to create a fresh ministry? I want to challenge you. Maybe in your personal life, in your church world, maybe your entire ministry organization. Are you putting together action plans and models based on a core value system that's going to help you? And if you'd like to find out more about Fresh, we've got some great ideas to help you out with that as well at www.freshman.org. And I'd love to talk with you about how to create those kind of plans. So let me take you on a journey real fast. A couple weeks ago, we went and visited a church. And a couple weeks before then, we went and visited another church. They had no idea that we were coming. This was not any kind of an assessment or coming out and evaluating the church. We were literally going to another city to get exposure, to go see what's happening in the church world, to go to another church. And so my wife and my daughter came along with us, and we had fun. And one of the things I enjoy when I go visit a church, I love to go in and experience church, but in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking through our core values. But after church gets over, I love to ask my 15-year-old daughter what she thought of the service. You see, my 15-year-old daughter's in a different generation than I am, and she has different perspectives than I do. And it helps me stay fresh to what's current. It helps me understand what this generation is thinking. And so these two churches, they were both from the same denomination. They were both about the same size. They had both had longevity in leadership. They were multiple services. They had all kinds of volunteers present, but their core values were different. And it was so easy to see that as we walked those two services. So let me take you to the first one. All right, so let's talk about that first church. And I'm not going to mention any names, but we went to a church in Columbus. We were there overnight because my daughter had a friend with her, and they were kind of getting excited to have a long weekend. So we had a long weekend together. That morning we got up and we went to church. And her friend was nervous because her friend came from a Catholic background. So the idea of singing any kind of worship or being involved in a church service that was different than the liturgy that she knew, well, it made her question a little bit. How is this going to go for me? So the whole time in our experience, I was watching out of the corner of my eye how the two girls were doing. So let me walk you through it. We pulled into the parking lot. The parking lot had people who were waving at us. They directed us where to go. They told us to turn on our headlights if we were new, if it was our first time. So we did. As we pulled up and parked, a lady came up and she said, "I noticed your headlights were on. Is this your first time here?" "Yes, it is." She pointed us towards a tent. "Make sure you go over there, and they would love to give you a gift and let you know how happy we are that you're here." We got over there and we were running a couple minutes late. The lady was really nice. She said, "Hey, why don't we just put a pin in this, and can you come back after service? Because I don't want you to miss what's going on in there. If you have questions, I would love to talk to you now. But otherwise, I want you to feel free to go into church." And we were like, "Thank you. We appreciated that." We saw 6 different people who greeted us between that particular tent and getting to our seats. People who said hi. Relationship must have been important there. I also noticed that they were pushing everybody forward. The back several rows were blocked off, and I didn't know if that's because it was a smaller service or what. It turns out it ended up being a packed service. They actually asked us to sit a little closer together because every seat in the place was full. People wanted to be there. Now, it was a typical big church worship service. There was lights, there was LED walls, a little bit of haze. It was nice. I noticed on stage that there was a diversified group of people up there, lots of different ages, different ethnicities, different genders up on the stage. My daughter and her friend loved that. Even looking around the congregation, the diversity was evident. We enjoyed the worship that was there, sat down. There were a couple announcements, and then something happened that I just happened to be there on a random weekend and got to experience. The associate pastor was being sent out to plant another church in the same city. And the lead pastor prayed over him, blessed their family, and they gave him an offering and sent him on their way. And I was like, that's pretty cool. Like, it's one thing to send off a pastor, but to be willing to do that within your own city, that's a pastor who's got confidence not only in who he is, but that God's raised him up to send out others. Then that Sunday again was a little different. It was a celebration Sunday where they talked about what they had done over the past year, different ministries, different nonprofit organizations, different missions that they had supported over that year. And in every situation, they talked about what they did and also what they gave. They were able to bless financially, but beyond that, they were involved in their community. Pastor wrapped up in the end with a great just challenge to us on how we can make a difference. The application was you could sign up at some places in the back to get involved and make an impact in the ministry. We left. Everything seemed to be going good, right? We get out to the tent, we sign out. There were 3 different people that talked to us. They let us know how much they appreciated that we came. They asked us questions about where we lived while we were looking for a church. As they realized that we didn't live in the area, we lived a couple hours away, they then let us know about online activity that their church had, how we could watch their services online, how they even had an online small group. They wouldn't have known that if they hadn't taken the time to talk to us and build relationship. One person specifically connected with both of those girls. They wanted to make sure those teens knew that they were welcome back. Then all of a sudden, we got to do an impromptu, a tour of the kids ministry area when they found out that I had been a kids pastor. And so we got to see their facilities, the safety elements that were there. It was a fun time. And it was neat talking to the girls as we left, how excited they were, that they wanted to come back, that this was a church that they could connect with. And so I looked at their core values as I looked online on their website, and I found it really interesting what they had listed on there. And so this church, their core values were alignment, that everyone's pulling in the same direction, involvement, belong and contribute, change, healthy things grow and growing things change, collaboration, build bridges together, adventure, take spirit-led risks, multiplication, make disciples, and diversity, we're better together. And as I read through that, I went, I could see those core values in that church. Everything from they were making choices to do things together, that they were involved together in their community, they were building bridges, that they were sending people out, that they were discipling people, that this was an adventure that they were on, and the diversity was so evident. But I want to take it a step further because for me, I have really felt that fresh has been a core value that I believe is important for every church to have: family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. And as I looked through that, I saw the family aspect. They were multi-generational. There was a feeling of belonging. I mean, even in that one Sunday, my family felt like we were part of their family. That's a success. Relationship. I was greeted. I was talked to. And within an hour after leaving church, I got a text from one of the pastors letting me know they were glad I was there. He was sorry he didn't meet me, but he would love to connect. I was like, wow, they're already desiring to create relationship. Experience. I mean, it was a great service. All of the components were there, as you would expect of a large church. But it was also an experience that my kids wanted to tell other people about. They bragged about it. They talked about it at school the next day. That's an experience. Safety. They had all the security aspects there. The policies and procedures were being followed. There was clear signage. There were security people that I could see that I, of course, trained eye, but I knew this is a place that's safe. And I felt safe being there with my family. And the last one was hope. I was encouraged about the future. I was encouraged about what they were doing as a church in their community. And to be honest, I wanted to be a part of it. You see, they had a fresh model and didn't even realize it. They had those core values in there that are making a difference in people's lives. They get it. All right, so let's talk about church number 2. I had to take my wife to the airport in Detroit. We dropped her off to catch a flight. And then my daughter and I went and found another church to visit. Just Googled, seeing what we could find, large church, found a place, went to check it out. Well, the experience right off the bat caught me off guard. There was construction happening outside their church. They have no control over that. I get that. But their parking lot was a mess. Now, it was pretty. It had all the lines. It had nice new blacktop on it. But the cars were all over the place. The congestion was crazy as one service was letting out, the other service trying to get in. I found that as I wrapped around just trying to get into a parking spot, I was clear on the back side of the building before I found a place to park. And not due to lack of parking, but due to lack of traffic flow. And there was nobody pointing where to go. There were a couple little signs that said worship center, but nothing that really caught my attention as a first-time person that was there. Once we got parked and we headed towards the auditorium, we did actually see a person in the parking lot. They were nothing more, though, than like a crosswalk guard that you might have at a public school or something. They were just trying to make sure I didn't get run over. The interesting thing is, I said hi to him, and then he goes, "Enjoy church." Like there wasn't really a conversation. That's okay. It happens. Get there, nobody at the door. Walked in, nobody at the second entrance inside. Looked around the lobby. Lots of chairs, lots of people, big lobby, long line to get coffee. Realized real quick we were not getting coffee at this place. I noticed the pastor. Now, again, I only noticed the pastor because I'd looked online and I saw his picture on their website. As they came walking out, he hurriedly had to catch somebody in the hallway and got their attention, then walked them back into a back room. And I understand sometimes as a pastor, you're busy, you're on point, you're trying to grab somebody. But I didn't see him even say hi to anybody else in that entire large lobby area. The security guard was with him, stayed right by his side, but there wasn't any kind of engagement with his people. We get to the door to go sit down, and right away I notice a sign that says no food or drink inside. I'm like, okay, good thing we didn't wait in line for a coffee because we wouldn't have been able to bring it in anyways. This is important, and I'll mention it again in a minute. There was a lady standing at the door. I asked her for a bulletin. She fished around for a little bit, finally gave it to us. We go inside as service is beginning, and roughly 20% full. The place was empty. Huge auditorium, maybe sat 1,800 people, and only a couple hundred people actually in their seats. We found a place very easily to seat. And as we looked out, we watched the service happen. Worship began. And again, they had a great production on stage. It had the lights and 5 LED walls and all the cool stuff that goes with that. The band was set up. And it was really neat actually watching the interaction of the worship leader with the audience. The rest of the team, they just kind of stood there. But that's okay. That's their church style, I guess. We noticed after about 30, 45 minutes, that finally some people started coming inside. The seats were starting to fill a little bit. Then they gave 15 minutes of announcements. I kid you not. And they announced everything under the sun. And everything they talked about was what they were doing and how you could give to help it. And as they talked about that over and over again, then the lead pastor got up and gave 3 more announcements on ways that you could give and make a difference as they were doing these activities in their community. In fact, on 2 of those things, we were told specifically that we couldn't attend, but we could give. Okay, we were there on a random Sunday. That can happen. Then the pastor got up to preach, and he preached, and he preached, and he preached. It was a 2-hour service. Okay, an hour and 54 minutes. How do I know that? My daughter tracked every minute of it. And as he spoke about end times. He talked about Israel and what's going on over there. He talked about the rapture. He talked about the rapture in a way that everybody in the church knew what he was talking about, unless you're an unsafe person that didn't know what the rapture was. And several times during his conversation, he made comments like, the last thing you want to do is be in the middle of a sin when the rapture happens. My daughter walked out of there going, you know what? It kind of felt a little bit of fear-mongering, like he was trying to scare me into not sinning. And I don't know that's how my relationship with God is supposed to be. Now, one of the things that we did appreciate as he was talking, he shared something that my 15-year-old really grabbed a hold of. He said, when it comes to a perspective of the world, you can't have a Republican perspective. You can't have a Democrat perspective. You can't even have an American perspective. You got to have a God perspective. And I saw my 15-year-old clap and I was like, okay, she got that one. That made sense to her because he wasn't promoting any particular party or opinion. He was promoting God, and that meant something to her. But then at another point, he asked everybody if they had a Bible to hold it up. And he goes, you're saints, you're godly, God's going to use you. And they said, if you're using an electronic device, hold that up. And then kind of as a joke, he said, oh, if you've got a phone, that's the mark of the beast. And then he just kept going. He kept going and going on it. How you buy and sell on your phone, it's got to be the mark of the beast. The best thing you do is not have a phone, as he's holding his phone. And my daughter shut down at that point. You see, for her generation, phone is part of life. It's not just an accessory. It's what you have every single day on your body, everywhere you go. And suddenly she was being told it's a mark of a beast. Yeah, probably not. We left, and as we were leaving, we were told, hey, if you're new, make sure you stop by the welcome area. Well, I looked when I arrived. I looked when I left. I never did see a welcome area anyways. So then I talked to my daughter. I asked what she thought about it. And you know what she pointed out? Dad, the sign said no drinks inside. But I saw so many people bringing drinks inside with them. I saw one person even eating a sandwich in there. If they don't enforce that, what else do they not enforce? And then she says this because she's been around me long enough. I wonder what they don't enforce in kids ministry. I'd be afraid to drop my kids off. Now, she's taken a very simple thing about don't bring your drinks inside. But to her, it was a big deal. To her, it talked about safety. So let's look at their core values for a minute. And there's nothing wrong with their values. They're just different. Here are their values. People. Well, from what we observed, that people was numbers. How many people were they putting in there? Biblical teaching. Hey, in an hour of teaching, there were lots and lots of verses. But it was very topical. It was all about what the major theme was that was on his heart. Excellence. Hey, the stage performance was a big deal. But as my daughter said, if that's all they have, there's nothing to brag about there. Outreach. Well, they gave, but they didn't necessarily participate in that outreach. Discipleship. During his message, he said, make sure you come on Wednesday. And then he made a joke about how it was poorly attended. Made me wonder, how well are we discipling here? And nowhere was there anything said about small groups or anything relationally. Generosity. You know, we were asked to give to 5 different things, and even the statement was said, I know we're talking about money a lot, but that's one of our core values. Well, to my 15-year-old, that was not something that excited her. Because all she's heard is church is all about money. And that church kind of solidified the point to her. And the last one was developing leaders. Now, I can't speak to that because I didn't see it. But as I talked to my daughter, she went back to our fresh core values, that family aspect. Well, I attended earlier that week a musical at a local theater, and I felt more connected with the volunteers there than I did at this church. I felt like I belonged at that theater. I didn't feel like I belonged at the church. Relationship. My daughter also observed that people in the audience, people in the congregation, they didn't really talk to each other. She didn't see people interacting, people shaking hands. People just came in, sat down or stood up, and then left. Even in the lobby, people were sitting in little groups with their immediate family, but we didn't see a lot of engagement that was occurring. Excellence. It was good, but it was 2 hours. You know what? We've got a generation of kids, they can't even watch a half-hour show all the way through. 2 hours of a service, incredibly long. Here's what I noticed. For the first hour, the congregation that was only about half full was primarily older people. And then about halfway through, I started watching younger families come in. Younger millennials coming into the service. They got to listen to the message, but they didn't want to sit for 2 hours. They were choosing not to participate in the worship so they could be in there for the service itself. Safety. I already mentioned the thing about the coffee. That definitely inspired conversation from my daughter. Now, overall, it seemed like a safe, healthy church, but that parking lot was a mess. And if my first exposure to the church is a messy parking lot, it says something about the rest of it. And finally, hope. You know, my daughter's opinion of that service was that he used fear tactics instead of sharing about the hope of Christ's return and what we can do until he comes. Yeah, there wasn't really hope shared. Now, there's nothing wrong with either of these churches, but one of them have core values that fit around a fresh ministry model, where it's important to them to have family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. And the other one, it didn't have that. Yeah, they had metrics that they could judge on, but were they the right metrics? Were they the right metrics that meet this generation? I have to question that because my 15-year-old didn't want to go back. And I can imagine many of those young families don't want to go back because they don't feel in touch with those core values. Remember, it's theology, philosophy, methodology. They have a lot of methods happening right there, but I don't know that their philosophy speaks to this generation right now. All right, well, obviously, I like my philosophy best when it comes to ministry. I believe in a fresh ministry model, but I want to ask you the question: are you doing a good job in ministry? What would a 15-year-old say who came into your church? What would a 25-year-old say who came to church? What would I say if I came to your church? What would you and your family say if they came to your church? Would they see your core values? Would they see a fresh ministry model? Would they see something where their family felt like they were part of the family, where there was instant relationship that was occurring and connectivity? How was the experience? Was it something that they talked about, that they wanted to go back to? Something beyond just the coolest song that you could sing, but the overall experience that touched their hearts? Is it safe? Does it create a safe element that they want to be a part of? And finally, church, we've got to speak the hope of Jesus. Even in the midst of end times, we know we're in the latter days. This is a time more than ever to speak about hope. Is your church doing a good job? Are you doing a good job in ministry? Well, check your values, evaluate yourself, and work to create a fresh church.